I want to convene the special call board meeting for January 7th, 2020, our first official meeting of the year. If I can please have a motion on our approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Agostini.
I'd like to make a motion to amend tonight's agenda, item 3, to read new business, no action requested, and approve the agenda for tonight's specially called meeting of January 7th, 2020.
Okay.
Is that right? 2020.
Yeah, that's right. It is 2020. So, all right. So I have a motion for the agenda with an amendment to 3.1 to be no action requested for information only. If I can have a second. Seconded by Mr. Shad. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Just a couple of points of why I've made this request. First of all, as it is a budgetary discussion, I did not find out until yesterday exactly what we were going to be voting on. So I'd like more information than just, we had a 2-minute excerpt at the end of our last executive session when we opened the door. And then secondly, I find this to be a really important question and an important vote that we're asked to be taking this evening. And it seems in these specially called meetings in December, we had one about rezoning that we put in a specially called meeting. And again tonight, I think these votes need to be taken in a general board meeting and not put in a specially called meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. With that, if we can please have, do you have a comment, Dr. Davis?
Just as a comment to that, this was placed into this meeting for the purpose of expediency. Administration is prepared to be as transparent as needed, whether it's in a general board meeting or a special call board meeting. All board meetings and notification of board meetings are public, and so therefore are open to the public for participation should the public deem it necessary to be a part of this, part of our public meeting, or our board meeting, which is held in the public. The information is also provided and to anyone who should request it through means of requesting information, as well as recorded on the YouTube channel for those who would like to look at our proceedings held in the public. But administration was suggesting this as a result of the last board meeting where we were the information was shared regarding our budget, and we're asking for an amendment to the budget in order to move forward with putting some things in place for the individuals within our district.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And just to back that up, certainly as the board chair, I agreed to put it on the agenda. With policies and a lot of the other work that we have, we just seem to have really packed agendas. And so I have been, while maybe not our always normal course of action, but it has been necessary to use these meetings to take care of some additional business while we go through these lengthy policies in our general meetings with all the other information that we've been requested to provide as well. But if there's no further comment,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
Just want to be clear. This was this agenda change is in compliance with the notice requirements to the public?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's all I need to hear then.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you. If I can now have the vote on the motion made by Ms. Agostini and seconded by Mr. Shad. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's the motion? I'm sorry.
So the motion that was made was to approve the agenda with the amendment to 3.1, which would make that a no action item. It would make it for information only, which is the budget amendment.
So is it for the next meeting?
So, well, we haven't said when it would be. What the motion was to approve tonight's agenda as is, except for 3.1. It would be just for information. And if that's the case, then we would have to put the item for a voting item on another meeting, which most likely would be the next meeting.
So, Mrs. Agostini, let me ask you a question. Can you amend your motion and have a vote for the following meeting?
We would have to have, because of the motion's already been made based off Robert's rules, if we want a amendment to the original motion to ask for that, then we can make a separate motion that would amend the primary motion.
Should this fail?
You can do it now. If you want to make a secondary motion to the original motion, you can make that motion now. And if it's seconded, then we would vote on the amendment to the original motion, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So if somebody would like to make a secondary motion to Ms. Agostini's motion, now is the time to do that.
Yeah.
I have called for the vote already, so, all right. So let's go back to the vote. We're voting on is everybody clear on the motion?
I think so.
And the second, okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back. Everybody in favor of the original motion, seconded by Mr. Shad, please raise your right hand.
And then I can make,
So I see one, okay. Tamika, you have that?
so I'll make a motion.
All right, everybody who is against the motion, or everybody's nay, raise your right hand.
Fails.
So motion carries, or fails, sorry,
Fails.
motion fails. Thank you. All right, so I need another motion.
Mr. Manning, I would
Yes,
like to
ma'am.
make a motion that we postpone the voting on this policy, well, what is it? The 3.1 tonight, and have the voting take place at the next meeting.
Okay, so you're making
Oh, that was the next.
well, the original motion, it didn't say when the voting item would be, but essentially it does the same thing, which is to say we will have the information for the item for information tonight, with the difference being that it would force the follow-up at the next meeting. So that's the motion that's on the
Oh.
table to amend the,
Okay. So,
and Dr. Elkins Johnson, if I can make sure I have this right, your motion is to approve the agenda with the exception of item 3.1 to be for information only, and have that added, item 3.1 added for a vote on the next meeting.
yes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Holmes. All right, is there any discussion?
Okay, so she won.
Everybody in favor of the motion, please raise your right
We
hand.
need to vote on this, right?
Make sure you raise them high so everybody can see.
Huh? Okay.
But we have a motion and a second, so we've got to vote now. I mean, yeah, so again, raise your right hand if you're in favor of the motion, please raise it high.
I don't know what. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so confused. I don't even know what I'm voting on, what I'm not voting on.
Well, you made the motion.
Yes, I know I did. That's why I'm totally confused because I'm hearing different things.
Maybe I can provide
Yeah.
a point of
Help me out.
clarification
See, I
for
came in here
Dr.
late
Ellis
now. I'm
Johnson.
trying to get myself calmed down.
We were in a
Okay, I'm
good
sorry.
conversation
Exactly.
today with Mr. Anderson.
Okay.
What we have under new business action requested is administration is bringing forth to the board a proposal to amend the budget, to add things to the budget from last year's surplus. We're asking for a vote tonight so that we can interact those things or implement those things with expediency. So a vote tonight will allow us to, if a favorable vote will allow us to implement them, a non-favorable vote will not. And you could wait to hear the proposal to then make a decision at that time, but the motion has been made by Ms. Agostini initially to postpone basically this vote to move it from an action item to a non-action item. So it would be new business, no action requested. Administration is asking for action to be requested tonight.
And actually, Dr. Elkins requested the same item to have it be, your request was to have item 3.1 be for information only tonight. But then you added the caveat that the item would be for action at the next board meeting, which would be this coming Tuesday. And
Okay.
so that was the motion you made, and it was seconded. And so where I'm at the point now where I've called for the vote. So everybody who's in favor of that motion, one more time, just now that we're all clear, raise your right hand. Please make sure you raise it high.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a 3 yes, all against the motion, raise your right hand. Motion fails. It ties, it fails. So if I can
Mr.
have.
Manning, let me ask you a question. Will we be able to have a discussion tonight as well?
Yes.
Then place the vote?
Yeah, once we get a motion and a second, then we can have open discussion on the item. After the presentation, and then, so we'll get the
Okay.
right, so we'll be able to get all the information, we'll be able to have open discussion in public. With it being a voting item, we will take the vote on that, what's been requested tonight, and then it passes or fails. And if it, for some reason, fails and the board fails it and says we want to have a follow-up recommendation, that's certainly an option as well. But it would be just like any other voting item that we have.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Holmes.
Yeah, I think that was my concern too. I wasn't sure how, I thought we just had to come in here and vote, but if we're going to hear the presentation and be allowed to have a discussion about it, then I'm a little more satisfied with that.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be it'll be a regular item where it's presented and full discussion allowed on the item with once we get a motion and a second, then we can have discussion just like any other item on our agenda that we vote on. Does that bring some clarity? So with that, can I have I need another motion for the agenda because we still have not approved an agenda at this point. Can I please have somebody make a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda for the specially called meeting of January 7th, 2020.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand.
I have a discussion, just a comment. I guess my concern is, I'm glad that we're going to discuss it, but it looks like we just received this. And I think that's the concern that we have, getting things at short notice and then not having an opportunity to go back and review it. So I think we just have to do much better when we're sending things out, and especially things of this magnitude, that it comes in a timely manner to give us an opportunity to look through it and then be able to make a sound and wise decision on what we want to do.
Okay. Any other?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll just follow up with what Dr. Elkins said. That's my concern too, and why I wanted to delay the vote. We just received the information yesterday at my request, because it was just a very general action request, but it didn't, there was nothing, that let us know what we were voting on until I called up or sent you and Dr. Davis an email. So it's the short notice that has the concern of me. Thank you.
I do understand that the information was presented to us prior to the break. I understand that the physical documentation came yesterday with the staff ensuring that it was the final recommendation, but it was as presented. But I do hear what you're asking for, and we'll try to do better.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just for the record, I would like to state that I did share the information in general about what the recommendation for administration would be. Actually, touching on each of the points that I plan to touch on tonight, and I stated that at a later time I would provide that information with specificity. We are not asking for the approval of a budget, and when we ask for the approval for the board to approve the budget, that is a very lengthy process. And so we do take time to make sure that the board is duly informed of the expenditures that we're asking the board to approve, as it does impact millage. This is an approval available as a result of the surplus from the 2018-2019 budget. Typically, all that happens is that money goes into the general fund. That's what's been the practice over the last several years with no issues. This year, administration is suggesting that we do some specific things with the surplus. And so we wanted to present that information to you tonight for your consideration for a vote. But we're not asking to do anything that we typically would not have done. Only the issue is that we're asking not to just put all the money into general fund. And as part of the administrative duties and responsibility is to give you some sort of outline of what we would like to do with the overage in the future. If that's something that it's not to be done in that way, this administration will accept direction from the board on how you would like to move forward with, should there ever be any surplus.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, if I can have the vote, please, for the motion to approve the agenda, which has been seconded. Can I please have the vote? All in favor? Raise your hands high, please. All against? Motion passes, 6-1? 5-1. Sorry, I can't do math right. I am juicing today, by the way, so I haven't had any solid food, so please forgive me if I seem a little loopy at times. All right, so next on our agenda is item 3.1, the general fund budget amendment. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, during the December board meeting, the district auditor presented the comprehensive annual financial report based on an audit for the fiscal year 2018-2019 general fund budget. The auditor reported that the district ended the budget year with a $16.9 million surplus, which is about 6% of the 2018-2019 budget. In the past few years, any budget surplus was rolled into the district's fund balance. However, this year, district administrators are proposing allocating the surplus to make investments in our future, our students, our employees, and our community. The proposal supports our district's strategic plan, mission, and vision. We recommend investing in our future by maintaining the fund balance at 20% of the 2019-2020 general fund operating budget. This will require about $9,650,000 of the surplus. This investment is needed to keep our district at a fiscally responsible level of reserves, which is the equivalent of approximately 2.5 months of our average operating costs, to maintain the district's level of financial security during the first 6 months of the school year when the state and federal revenues have a couple of dips and local revenue is minimum. This would prevent the district from having to issue a tax anticipation note, which ultimately costs the district money in the way of interest and assurance cost. Also, to maintain the strong fiscal foundation that has been invaluable in the bond market and has allowed us favorable borrowing rates and bond ratings. An adequate level of fund balance also is a factor considered at the state level in determining the district's overall risk factors. We recommend investing in our students with a one-time general fund budget allocation of $25 per student to supplement our school's discretionary instructional allocations to be used for classroom supplies and instructional incentives. The estimated cost of this investment is $750,000. We also recommended investing in our students with a one-time general fund budget allocation of $25 per student to our media centers for updating circulations and providing additional media supplies and resources. Again, the estimated cost of this investment is $750,000. We would also like to recommend investing in our employees by giving a one-time bonus of $1,000 to all full-time permanent employees. The estimated cost of this investment is $4.1 million, which includes the related elevated fringe. And we recommend investing in our community with the one-time transfer of $3.5 million from the general fund reserves to the building fund. This investment helps lessen the impact of taxpayers for the funding of annual capital improvement expenditures, or 8%. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Board, if I can have a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
I move that we amend the 2019-2020 fiscal year budget to add the surplus from the 2018-2019 fiscal year at this time.
Can I, would it be okay if I get the motion as it's proposed would include specifics as to how what the actual budget amendment?
I'd be happy to. That's
asking
actually
for.
really what I wanted to do, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
I need
Thank
some of
you.
your juice. All right, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move to amend the fiscal year 1920 general fund budget to include the following allocations utilizing a portion of the fiscal year 18-19 budget surplus. $750,000 for supplemental classroom supplies to be allocated to all schools in the district to support our students. $750,000 for additional media supplies and resources to be allocated to all schools to support our students. $4.1 million to give a one-time bonus of $1,000 to all full-time permanent employees, and $3.5 million transferred from the general fund to the building fund to help offset future capital improvements needs that are typically funded through annual 8% debt limit borrowing.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Mr. Shad. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Holmes. And this is now the time for discussion. So comments or questions? Dr. Holmes?
I do have one question. Dr. Davis, maybe you can, with the one-time bonus for the full-time employees, is that going to have to be taxed at that higher tax rate, or is that going to is that going to be absorbed into their salary?
I think there's a policy or regulation from the federal government that is taxed at 22%.
Is it 22 or 25? Is it 20?
I think it's
Where's Hannah?
22%.
It's 22.
It's 22?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have to tax that?
Correct.
22? Okay, I thought so. Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini?
First of all, Dr. Davis, thank you for the explanation that you gave. To me, it would have been helpful to receive that information, perhaps in a couple of slides, so that I could better ask questions for this evening. As it pertains to the $1,000 bonus, which I believe Dr. Elkins Johnson suggested last year, and I'm happy to support, one of my questions would be, we've got approximately, well, how many full-time employees do we have qualified for that?
It's probably about 3,600. Is that about right? I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's about 3,600.
And then the $1,000 bonus, the $1,000 bonus, how does that calculate to $4.1 million?
Fringe benefits.
Thank you.
You have FICA in additional to that. Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to be clear on that for the record. How was it determined where the money would go and who was involved in the decision-making process?
We followed the strategic plan and outlined the proposal to you all based on our strategic plan. So we wanted to concentrate on our students. We wanted to concentrate on our faculty and staff, or our employees, which is part of our talent. We also wanted to work with our community, which is also a part of our strategic plan as well. And also we wanted to be prepared for the future. So we've had conversations, and the board has participated in some conversations or presentations about the possibility of an economic downturn that is possibly looming. So we wanted to make sure that we are positioning ourselves appropriately to be able to handle any issues that may come about. So this represents about, like I said, about 2.5 months of operating expense for our district. We are receptive and have heard the concerns as relates to incentives for our teachers and pay. And as you stated, it was stated earlier that was something that we could have looked at. So we want to remain competitive with other school districts that have also offered incentives and bonuses. And so this is an opportunity for us to do this at this time. There's also been been some concerns, and this has been an issue with us in the past. It's not the first time. I want to make sure that people understand that it's not the issue with the media specialist is not something that's new just because we had a media specialist presentation the last board meeting. Media specialists have been asking for this for several years now, and we've done this before. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to do this at this time since we have the surplus. And then to put some money into the classrooms. Teachers are in their pockets to provide supplies, classroom materials for their students. So this gives us an opportunity to infuse some money back into the general fund for principals and schools so that they can issue and put materials in place in their schools for their teachers. And that's how we made that decision. That was a decision that was jointly made with district leadership.
Ms. Agostini, other questions?
Yes, I still have a few more questions. Okay. How will the money be distributed for classroom supplies? Is that just directly given to the school and the principal has the authorization or authority to disseminate the money, or will each teacher be given, an allotment of dollars and they are able to determine what they want for their classroom?
Well, each teacher doesn't teach the same number of students. And so it will be difficult to just give the allotment of $700, the allotment to the teacher specifically, but this is something that will be a part of the general fund that will be given to the schools to allocate accordingly to their schools and to the needs of their students. All in order to be equitable in the distribution of this, that's the appropriate way to do it. All students don't need the same amount of materials or supplies, and so it's important that we allot this money so principals can make an equitable distribution of the funds and not an equal distribution of the funds.
My next question is, does the money that we're giving to the media specialist and for the classrooms need to be spent by the end of June 2020?
It does not.
Okay, and my final question, at our December 10th meeting, we talked about a performance-based contract with Johnson Controls and the need to have a special obligation bond resolution. Why would we not be using the money that we're talking about today to reduce the amount needed for the special obligation bond?
As we share the special obligation bond, that is not a cost to the taxpayers. So we wanted to use this money to infuse back into the schools, directly to our employees, to our community, and to better position the district for future cost issues.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Well, I think Mrs. Agostini just addressed a few of my questions, but I want to go back to the classroom supplies. I would love to see some type of way that we can actually give teachers the funds. Like at the beginning of the year, we give teachers $250. I'd love to see a way that we can do that, because I don't want teachers feeling like if one teacher received $1,500 and they received only $50 because they don't need as many supplies, but they could also use that money for other things in the classroom. So I'd love to see a way that you guys can go back and see how we can do that without having the principal to make that determination, because it could be other things in the classroom that teachers may be able to use with technology or with books or just other supplies in their classroom. The other thing is for the media supplies and resources, will we allocate maybe to each school media specialist like $50,000 or $100,000 or something like that? If you can just give me more details of the media piece.
For the media, and I'll let Dr. Malley answer the questions, because I think there's some stipulations with giving them the surplus or giving them some money directly in their pockets like we do at the beginning of the year that we discussed. But to answer the media specialist question, the money has been doled out based on your population or the number of students at your school. So you're getting $25 per student, which we based the $750,000 on the number of students in the district. So it'll be different at different schools because they have different numbers of students. And the same thing with the money that will be put into the general fund for instruction. It comes to $750,000, but it's $25 per student. So the bigger schools will have more, but it's based on the per student, and then the principals will use that. And now this isn't anything different from what they already do with the instruction instructional funds that they have at the beginning of the year based on the needs and the programs that they have in their schools, because the needs and the programs in schools are a little bit different. But Dr. Malley, could you speak to the other issue of the question?
The teacher supply check. The problem with that, and we discussed that at length, the problem with that is the one that they would get in the beginning of the year has special legislation attached to it, and it's not taxed. These funds, if we gave it directly to the teacher, would be treated as a bonus and taxed. And so that was our consideration. It could be done, but a lot of the money wouldn't get to the teacher. And that's what's nice about the special legislation in the beginning of the year. That teacher supply check has special legislation that says it's not taxed.
Right, and maybe it was a misunderstanding. I didn't clearly ask my question. Not directly to the teacher, but each teacher can go and use the $500 at Books A Million, or they can order a camera for their classroom, almost like the donor's choice list. So it's not going directly to the teacher, but if each teacher had a set amount, then they can go to the principal and say, with my $500, I would love for you to order this for my classroom. And it's not really going directly a check to the teacher, but it's going to the principal, their wish list with the amount that is allocated for each teacher.
I think that's I think that's a good suggestion. It's something we thought about. The issue with that is, again, that every teacher doesn't teach the same amount of students. And so you would allocate $500. We want to allocate the money by per pupil, per student. So some teachers may teach 100 kids. Some teachers may only teach 7 kids. And then they're getting $500 for their classroom versus a teacher who's teaching 120 kids is getting $500 for their classroom. That's equal, and it's not an equitable situation. So we would have to develop a way of getting the money to that teacher based on the number of kids. So if we did $25 to that teacher per student that teacher teaches, then we would need to have a mechanism in place to ensure that teacher is spending that money. We wanted to put this issue back in the hands of the principals, and let the principals and their leadership team and the teachers decide the most appropriate way to fund instruction at their school based on the programs and the needs of that particular school. That was our recommendation. Yes, ma'am.
And in regards to the media allocation, we did this about 4 years ago, but the same format. We, on a per pupil basis, allocated to the individual schools, and that's how we allocated. And it was, if I remember right, fairly well received. And so it was time. It was nice to be able to do this again, because, as you know, they have been asking for it again. So I think that was real positive.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, ma'am.
Question. Dr. Davis, this $1,000 bonus, will they receive that like at the end of the school year or the beginning of next school year? When will they receive the bonus?
As soon as we can get it to them.
Okay, cut those checks tomorrow.
We'll make sure.
As soon as we can get it processed and get it to them in their hands.
Being responsible for payroll and payroll checks, let's be responsible in our promises here and realistic. We have 2 payrolls in January. We have W-2s that have to be gotten out in February, January. So I talked to the staff today. We're going to get them out as fast as we can without disrupting any other paychecks and operations. But we think we can do it relatively quickly.
Which is interesting, because that was part of the, one of the reasons to get it on tonight's agenda was if we approved it, it got that money to the teachers faster. So I guess we ended up doing the right thing, maybe Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes, and Dr. Davis, thank you and your team for looking out for teachers, because after the holidays and just life in general, I'm pretty sure they'll appreciate it. So
Well, that was our thought when we initially discussed it back in December, was to try to get it out as quickly as possible, which we would have loved to be able to do this a little bit before the winter break, but that would have been pushing it. And we want to set anybody's expectations, but hopefully we can get this out as soon as possible, if approved.
Yes,
if approved.
Mr. Chair.
I got Dr. Holmes next, and then Mr. Shad.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, Dr. Davis, thank you so much for the bonus for the teachers. I appreciate that because I know that that's going to mean a lot to them. Hopefully it'll be more next time. We want a little bit more for them, but we'll start with this. But myself and all the other board members up here have been pushing for that. And so we are just so happy to see that bonus for teachers. They absolutely deserve it, and kudos to you and your staff for including that.
Mr. Shap?
Well, first, I'd like to say kudos to the administration, the district, the fiscal department to make sure that we were good stewards of the taxpayers' monies to the point that we had a surplus from last year, which puts us in this position where we can potentially add this to the budget for this current year. I believe that we are being responsive to the concerns of all, not just parents, but we're supporting the students, we're supporting our teachers in the classroom, and from a financial standpoint. And of course, we are doing the business of the community and in anticipating what the economists are saying is on the way, and we want to try to make sure we shore up for that. And so I'm obviously in full support of it, and I hope that all my colleagues are as well, that we are saying yes to education. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I want to say I'm in favor too. I think the staff did a great job. I think when we look at not only our strategic plan, but when we look at what we've been requested from folks like SE for Ed, from our educators, we all read in the newspapers every day, money back in the classroom, supporting our teachers. And actually in this case, it's more than just our teachers. It's also all the full-time instructional staff, our technology folks, all of the folks that make our district work at every level. And so it permeates throughout. I also want to point out that through the capital fund dollars that we're looking to allocate to the capital fund, that will reduce stress on our 8% budget, which will directly impact our taxpayers in a positive way, and build in some allocation should we need it during a downturn in the economy or other opportunities. So that will help save dollars. And will give us a lot more capacity for being responsible with our money and providing some flexibility in the future, which if anybody who's kept up with, it's been a struggle with 8%. So this really is a big deal to be able to put these dollars aside and help reduce the stress on that fund. So with that, at this time, we will take the vote. The motion's been made. There's been a second. Everybody in favor, please raise your right hand. Ma'am? Yeah, but not everybody's on their computer. That's why it's, all right. So it passes unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Next on our agenda is our item number 4, new business, no action requested. Dr. Davis.
Mr. Manning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have before you new business, no action requested. We have a list of policies that we will move through. Mr. Smith will direct us, beginning with policy JFAA, admission of resident students, and he stands ready to answer any questions that you have regarding the policies as we move through them one at a time.
All right, board members, any questions or comments on policy JFAA, item 4.1?
Number is it?
Dr. Evans-Johnson?
Yeah.
Dr. Davis? While you're over there, I hate to ask you, but my coffee's on the... Thank you. Sorry. Dr. Evans-Johnson?
No questions on 4.1.
It is actually. Thank you. Okay.
I have I just,
Ms. Agostini?
a quick question for clarification and just for my understanding, for proof of residence on page 3, is this for only the first time enrollment and not students that are re-enrolling or, are continuing on their education? On page 3, it says at the bottom, 3 proofs of residency are required in order for the student to attend Richland School District 2. Typical documents requested for this purpose are as follows, and then it has a list. Is this for just new students coming to attend Richland 2 schools, or would this?
That's
okay,
correct.
be an annual thing? All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments on item 4.1? All right, item 4.2, policy revision JFABC. Questions or comments?
Mr.
Dr.
Manning,
Johnson, yes.
just a question, on page 3, if we put it up, 4.2. And Dr. Davis, if you can clarify this for me, I was thinking that we could add that they can also appeal to the board, or should we just keep it the way that it is on 4.2? At the bottom of page 3?
Yes, ma'am. It was right now, it was that the decision is to transfer. Each of the parent, guardian of a student may appeal a transfer and head to the board.
Yes.
Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
Now it says that's stricken and asking any such appeal will be requested in writing to the superintendent for his or her designee to state that. Right now, it can come to the board. We're suggesting that it comes to the superintendent and administration. Now, they can always appeal any decision of the superintendent to the board, and you can decide to take up that appeal should the board decide to do that.
So should we insert that if they do not agree with the superintendent, they can appeal to the board, or is that just understood?
It's understood. My recommendation is to leave as is and not have a process where the board is being tied down with appeals for transfers.
Okay.
Because actually the board has many appeals that you have to deal with already, and this is probably one additional thing you don't need.
Okay.
All right, other questions or comments? All right, item 4.3, policy JFB, school choice. This is a new policy. All right, item 4.4, policy revision JH, student absences and excuses.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Just clarification again, Dr. Davis. On 4.4, if you go again to the bottom of page 3, it indicates that if you start with the last paragraph, the only exception would be, and if you go through that, and it says something about suspension or expelled by the board, could we say it's recommended for expulsion? Or the district hearing officer? If you go remove district hearing officer and insert board, since the board makes the decision about expulsion? Am I reading that clearly?
Which policy?
What policy are we on?
We are on
Are we on
policy,
JH?
JH. What page
JH.
are you making reference to?
Page 3, that last paragraph. Am I? You know what? I forgot. We changed that. We received a new one. So, hold on a second.
Is that the new one?
That's the new one, because this is the one that was originally sent to us on that Thursday, and then I think the revised policy came yesterday. So let me go back to line 4. I forgot, this is totally, well, let me just ask this question first, since we have that. I noticed that the JH that we received on last Thursday and then the one that we received today is totally different. So is there a reason behind that? And then I can go back to my new changes. Well, it said only grammatical things, but it's not. It's more than just grammatical.
Right, the error on JH was on page 1 in the second and third paragraphs, where she replaced will with with, and the word and with and, A-N. Those were the only differences in what you got yesterday.
Yes.
Well,
So maybe it was a mistake. It was totally different.
so the JH that's presented to us, are there questions or comments on the JH that's on our agenda?
Well, I guess before I can make my comments, I made comments on both of the JHs. So which one are we going to?
The one that's on the current agenda, the one that's been provided to the
The one
public?
that's there.
That's correct.
Okay, so let me go back. So for the new one on page, was line 4. So, let me go back. 1 second. This one now, right? This one? Is that the right one? Okay, let's just go to this one. On page 1, if you go down to the paragraph that starts with, in accordance with state regulations, that's the second paragraph from the bottom. Okay, when it says that absences must exceed the 10, should we insert days? Absences must, that must exceed the 10 days. Should that include days?
Yes, I see what you're saying. Absences that exceed the 10 days must be approved instead of
Just the 10?
10 days.
Right.
Okay, so Dr. Johnson, would you like to make a recommendation that we
Insert.
change that, insert days after the number 10 there?
Yes, I'd like to just make a motion that we insert days after the number 10 in that paragraph.
Or
The
can I,
second
can I
paragraph.
ask a question before we finish that? And later on, it says 10 absences. Do you want to make that consistent, or you want it to say 10 days?
Well, no, that's different. Yes.
Okay, so 10
Yes.
days. All right, so 10
days
days.
for the first one.
Recommendation is to amend the policy JH to include the word days after the number 10. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shad. Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Please raise them high. And as far as I can see, it's unanimous. Okay. Other questions or comments on policy JH, item 4.4?
I have Mr. Chair, I have a couple
ma'am.
of questions.
Okay.
Just seeking some clarification. On page 2, the district will consider students unlawfully absent under the following circumstances. The student is absent without acceptable cause with the knowledge of their parent guardian. Could I be given examples of what that might be?
of a student being absent without an
Acceptable
acceptable cause with the knowledge of it. Essentially, a student doesn't show up for school. Let's say, for example, the student drives him or herself to school, and they decide not to come to school that day, and mom or dad does not know until the absence is reported. It's still an unlawful absence.
Well, it says that they're absent with the knowledge of their parent or guardian. I guess the point of where I'm going with this is
Without.
I'm looking at right above that prearranged absences for other reasons and/or extreme hardships determined at the discretion of the principal. I'm thinking about, I have a daughter that swims competitively, and often she'll have to leave school Friday afternoon, and it's not school related. For those kids that are involved in arts or other competitions,
Right.
that doesn't seem to fall on the list of excusable absences.
It's a lawful absence. Above that, it says the district will consider students lawfully absent under the following circumstances, and that's the bullet list of, so that would be a lawful absence.
Well, I don't see that there. Pardon me?
It's at the top of page.
I realize that
top
you
of
can't
page
miss it
2.
all. But these aren't for school related, is my question.
It's if you are aware that your student is absent and you provide that information, then it is a lawful absence. The problem with absences, and the reason why we're being specific with the term lawful and unlawful, is that there are no excused or unexcused absences. An absence is an absence. And the problem when we say an excused absence is that you believe it does not count. There are only two types of absences. There's a lawful absence and an unlawful absence. If the parent is aware of the absence, provides the appropriate documentation, so if your your daughter is swimming and you provide that information to us, that is a lawful absence. It still counts in an absences though toward their number of absences they get during the year. It's just not a truancy issue. It's not going to be counted against them as it relates to unlawfully being out of school.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Does that need to be prearranged, or I can send in a note on Monday if she misses Friday?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
One other question, just for my information on page 3, and it's talking about high school credit. This is new to me. It's the second sentence, bottom of the page. At the discretion of the school principal, students may be eligible to pay to make up missed days. What does that mean?
Students who are in excess of the number of days required in order to have seat time can come in and make up that seat time. And typically when they come in and make up that seat time, they pay a fee for someone to sit there with them to make up the number of days to bring them back into compliance with absences, with the number of absences they can have in order to get credit for that seat time. This only happens typically at the high school level.
Thank you for sharing that.
And this is going on forever.
Can I add something to that? And just
Dr.
something for Dr. Davis to think about later. Can we make sure that we have a uniform cost of that? Because I know certain schools.
We already addressed that.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we did. That was a couple years ago.
Okay, so that's taken care of. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments on 4.4 policy JH? All right, item 4.5, policy JIAA, educational opportunity for military students. And y'all please speak up.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
Just a spelling check for middle of the page, page 1. Active duty member means full-time duty status in the active uniformed service. Should it be services? It's been pretty uniform down there that it's uniformed services. And then I have a question as it pertains to, it continually makes reference in this policy to sending state, but our schools are coming from, or some of our students that are military families come from abroad. So when we're checking with a state, they might not actually be at a state.
Is there a recommendation, Ms. Agostini, of an addition?
At this time, no, I don't have a recommendation. I wanted to know, why we continually made reference to us sending, the sending school, or the record from the school in the sending state.
This is a new policy, and so this is the way the policy is received from the School Board Association. So we have the ability, of course, to make a recommendation. There's a recommendation to add from addition to state or abroad, from an institution from abroad, then.
Well, I guess, my recommendation would be from where it's put from the school in the sending state to just switch it to sending school.
Okay, we'll take that. Motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Is everybody clear on? No. Okay. Ms. Agostini, can you just
Well, if we look at
repeat where that
page
is?
2, under educational records and enrollment, the last sentence, well, I'll just start second to the last line. The district will request the official record from the school in the sending state. Then 2 paragraphs down there, in the middle sentence, the 3rd line, age requirement in the sending state. Those are 2 that I was able to highlight. I think it's in there a couple more times, but with all 30 policies, I didn't go through thoroughly and circle every time it said sending state.
So you're requesting anywhere where it says the sending state, we say the sending school
Sending
is what your
school.
request is. So that would be regardless of whether it's from a state or abroad or wherever.
I don't think then it would discriminate. I mean, it would be inclusive.
All
Dr.
right.
Davis, Mr. Manning.
Yes.
This policy is based on the interstate compact, and so it's written, which is a federal law, so it's written from the standpoint of between the states, this will be the agreement. So I think that's why it says state as opposed to other
Thank you.
agencies or abroad.
I'm just seeing that up on top, and so that would have helped clarify things earlier on. Thank you.
Okay, so you're rescinding that
Yes.
motion, okay. And as far as the 1S, I think we can just make that change without a motion on that. All right, any other questions or comments on 4.5, policy revision JIAAA? All right, policy 4.
Chair?
Yes, sir, Mr.
I'm
Shaq.
sorry. I have no problem with adding the S, provided that it is not different from the interstate compact that Dr. Grant just spoke of.
Okay, so let's take a look at where that S is to make sure that it doesn't change.
Because it's in the definition section, so I'm assuming that it's straight from that. But if it's
Okay.
if it's on us, then of course we need to make that change. But if it's
That's fine.
if
Ms.
that's that
Agostini, can you
federal
point
law.
out where that S is again?
Mr. Chair, it's under definitions. The middle of the first page, active duty member means full-time duty status in the active uniform service of the United States. My question would be is that in the active uniform services, if we're looking down below under applicability, multiple times there's reference to the uniform services.
Yes.
In the actual compact, it does say for active duty, full-time duty status, and active uniform service without.
So that's just a take from the, okay. Okay, so we won't, so no change there. We'll leave it as is.
Mr. Chair, and
Yes, sir.
Also, and I do appreciate Mrs. Agostini saying that if you look down, it references the plural active duty members, which then should go with the active uniform services. Unlike in the definition section, it talks about an active duty member, singular, which corresponds with the active uniformed service. You can only be in one service at a time, as I understand it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this policy? All right, item 4.6, policy JICJ, possession use of electronic communication devices. Questions or comments?
Mr. Manning?
Yes, Ms. Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
I have a question on 4.6 on page 2. That second bullet from the bottom where it states that students may use phones to contact parents, or school phones to contact parents, guardians during the school day with permission of the administration. Can we change that to add or his or her designee? Because sometimes the administration may not be on campus and maybe a teacher or support staff.
All right, Dr. Elkins-Johnson, so you're asking to amend the policy to.
Right, and just to insert
The bookkeeper.
his or her designee, because a lot of times it's the office staff that allows the students to use the school phones. And if we say administration, they may not be allowed to use the phone.
Okay, motion's been made by Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is everybody clear on the motion? Okay, if I can have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Agostini. Is there any discussion? All right, everyone in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimous. All right, any other questions or comments on?
Just a question
Yes, ma'am, Dr.
for
Elkins-Johnson.
clarification, Dr. Davis. Here for the elementary and middle school, as well as the high school, we're indicating that they can't use or display their cell phones. But is that just understood that it will be okay if they're doing a school project with the teacher? Because it doesn't read that way.
As my understanding, this has been a policy for a while now that's quite different from what we allow at the high school level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted.
And so for the elementary students, the teachers aren't allowing them to use their cell phones in class for projects. They're using the devices that we're providing them.
Okay, so what about high school?
High school, with the permission of the classroom
Right,
teacher,
right.
they can use their devices. The understanding belief there is, of course, is that high school students are more responsible and following expectations when it comes to cell phone usage. And I say that with a smile.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so that's just understood for the
Yes,
high school
ma'am.
portion? Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Policy 4.7, JICJA, social media and electronic communication. Policy 4.8, JIH, student interrogation, searches and arrests.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
On page 1, school lockers and desk, it only mentions that lockers are the property of the school district. Do desks need to be included in there as well? That all lockers are the property of the school district? School officials may conduct searches of lockers in accordance with the publicized administrative rules. Does that pertain to desk as well?
Ms. Agassi, it would pertain to desk, and I think it's a reasonable addition to that policy. I would say that it probably only applies to elementary school, because the high schools and middle school students sit at desks that don't have the little cubby spaces that can't be searched. But it makes sense to add it to be consistent.
Okay, so Ms. Agostini, will you please reiterate what your motion is?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we add that the motion read, all lockers and desk are the property, ... and then we'll go to the second line. School officials may conduct searches of lockers and desk.
Okay, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Please raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimous. All right, further questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to item 4.9, policy revision JIHC, use of metal detectors.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Guys, please forgive me. I'm ready to go just like you guys. Just a question. If you go down to the bottom of that first paragraph, when it starts with any search of a student's person as a result, should one of those words be removed?
We're on the policy.
JIHC?
Yeah, JIHC.
See right here? Students and then person. Right.
Search of a student's body. They're talking about the body there. So that's why it's person.
So of a student's person, so that is correct? Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, item 4.10, policy revision JII, student concerns, complaints, and grievances. Ms. Agostini?
Mr. Chair, on page 3, we have Title IX complaints stricken. Is there a reason for that?
Can you
We
scroll
have
to
Title
page
VI
3 on the
complaints on
screen?
page 2 highlighted, and then we also have Section 504 complaints, but I'm wondering the purpose for us to remove the Title IX complaints title.
Will you scroll to page 3 on the screen?
At the very top of that, the heading, Title IX. Is that an oversight?
Okay, Ms. Agostini, would you like to make a recommendation that we amend the policy as presented?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend the policy just to have Title IX complaints put back in,
So unstricken?
unstricken,
Is that the right legal term?
added.
Yeah. All right, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shad. Is there any discussion? Everyone, please raise their right hands that are in favor. Motion passes unanimously. Other questions or comments? All right, item 4.11, policy revision JJ, student activities.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Dr. Davis, for clarity, that second paragraph on page 1, where it says the board is responsible for the monitoring of all interscholastic activities, should that say the superintendent? Since we don't monitor any of that?
I think that's a good suggestion, a recommendation to change that to district superintendent.
Okay.
I will lean to Mr. Smith, who has served as our district athletic director for a while. Do you have any insight on why that would have been the board to begin with?
No, that was just
How it came from
that
them?
was
Okay.
just how the policy has always been.
Okay, so Dr. Elkins-Johnson, you want to change that to say the district superintendent sanctions student activities?
Yes.
So that's the motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? Everyone in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimous. Other questions or comments on policy JJ?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
A couple of grammatical or spelling. Under interscholastic activities, the first paragraph, the second to the last line, where it talks about, well, individuals or members of groups involved in activities that include out-of-school practice on more than 2 hours per week. My suggestion would be of more than 2 hours per week. And then on page 2, I believe it's supposed to be units, and it's spelled UITS.
Okay, so Ms. Agostini, you want to,
Do I have to make a
Do we see
motion for
that?
that?
sir?
Last, you need a motion for grammatical.
Well, I think based
Okay.
off of the last request, the idea that it may change something, make sure everybody's clear, let's just do it by the book. So if I can have a motion, Ms. Agostini, for the recommended changes.
I'd like to make a motion to strike the word on page 1 under interscholastic activities. And it starts with that include out-of-school practice on more than 2 hours per week, and add the word of in replace of on. And also on page 2, add units, or strike UITS and add the word units.
Okay, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Is everybody clear on the motion? All right, can I get a second? Seconded by Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimous. All right, other questions or comments on JJ?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I've got a couple of questions now, just for clarity.
Okay. Ms. Agostini.
At the bottom of page 1, to be eligible to participate in interscholastic activities, the student must achieve, and it goes through an overall passing average 1.5 GPR as a freshman, 1.75 GPR as a sophomore, and 2.0 average as a junior and senior, in addition to the fouling. Now, are the in addition to the fouling is that for everyone, or is that for just juniors and seniors?
That's for everyone.
Well, I guess my confusion then is when we're talking about a freshman, for a freshman to be eligible, they would not have participated in I'm obviously not understanding this policy. They would not have, been in it's made reference to later, I guess, how freshmen, I guess I'm just confused. How freshmen have to, to be eligible in the first semester, a student must pass a minimum of 5 Carnegie units applicable. I can see how this would pertain to sophomores, juniors, and seniors, but the first bullet points, I don't understand how it would be applicable to a freshman.
It will be with the freshmen with the second semester. Because with the freshmen, when they first come in, they're coming from middle school, so they have to be promoted. And that isn't listed right there, but that's part of the high school league rules.
Well, I know, but that's why I asked if this pertains to all students, and he said it pertains to all students. So I'm going to have to just think about that one, because for me, it still seems very confusing. Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions or comments on policy, JJ? All right, item 4.12, policy revision, JJA, student organizations.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for clarity. Dr. Davis, if you go to the second paragraph where it says the board is authorized to regulate, control, and it goes forth, should that be replaced with the superintendent on that line? Since the board does not regulate, control, or prohibit clubs or activities?
I'm not in opposition of that. Yeah, I think that I think it applies to the same premise as you stated earlier.
Okay, then let me go to that second.
Because I think there's a couple other ones that will
Right.
then need to be
Because the
addressed.
second line says the board delegates to the principal of each school, and should that also be?
Superintendent.
Yes, okay,
Dr. Holshaw, do you want to just make the recommendation for both of those changes at once?
yes. I would just make a recommendation that we remove board and replace it with district superintendent
And then also on the, do you want
on
to?
both
Okay.
in that sentence.
So the recommendation is to, has been made, the motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Everyone in favor, raise your right hand. All right, y'all got to raise those hands high. All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for clarification.
All right, Ms. Agostini.
It's under the qualifications for memberships in student organizations, and it talks about that criteria must permit all students to complete for membership without prejudice as to, and then we have a list of what our general list is, but sex is considered in there. And I just need an explanation how we've got, male mentorship programs and Girls for Pearls. Would these programs be in compliance with this policy?
The programs would be in compliance with the policies. Should we not have a mentoring program and for girls, and a girl wants to join a mentoring program, she would not be discriminated against if we did provide a like program for that student. So membership would be granted on those bases.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? All right, item 4.13, policy revision JJAB, limited open/closed forum. Policy 4.14, policy revision JJE, student fundraising activities. 4.15, policy
Mr.
revision JJ, yes, sir.
The administration would like to pull 4.15. We need to do some more work on that one. That is
The student activities funds?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the next one. Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me, which policy?
I was on 4.14, the student fundraising activities, but they're recommending 4.15 be pulled.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have my computer, so can you read the policy
Yeah,
or
I'm
just
sorry.
the
Okay,
letters?
yeah. So hold on, let me back up.
one are we
4.14,
pulling?
policy JJE, student fundraising activities. Is there any questions or comments on that one?
Okay,
Then item 4.15 is policy revision JJF, student activities funds. That is the one that that administration is asking to have pulled for further work.
We need to do some more work.
thank you for clarification.
Okay, so that one will be pulled. Item 4.16, JJG, contest for students. Any questions or comments? Item 4.17, policy revision JJI, interscholastic athletics. Item 4.18, policy revision JK, student discipline.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
I have a question for clarity, Dr. Davis. On that policy, if you go to the bottom of the page where it says section 5919, and it says give district trustees authority to prescribe, who are the district trustees? Is that the board or principals or?
The trustees is be the board.
Okay. Okay, that's the only question I had.
All right, item 4.18, policy JK, item 4.19, policy revision JKA, corporal punishment / physical force. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Yes, let me get to it. Give me 1 second. It looks different now. Any staff of those trainings. Go ahead with Mr. Shad, and then I'll come back.
All right, Mr. Shad.
Dr. Davis, is this the administration's request? Please forgive me with the yellow and all that. It's been a while. To strike that an employee cannot defend oneself to a student?
Oh, that was my other one.
Because it was apparently yeah. I mean, obviously.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was a lot of conversation around this bullet point on determining intent to defend self, and so yeah, we brought it to you all with this with that bullet point stricken out, struck out. Yes.
Okay, should we maybe look at referring this to the teacher advisory committee or to legal for additional consideration? I'm not making the recommendation. I'm just asking the board if they want to consider that or not.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to consider that.
I got to have a motion for it.
You have, just as a point of discussion, you have other things that allow you to use force to quell a disturbance which threatens physical injury to persons, which could be yourself, including those students involved, or which threatens serious damage to property, to obtain possession of weapon, or to remove a student from a classroom or other school property when the student's continued presence poses a threat or danger to other persons or property. And so we believe that with those other identified items, you had enough latitude to use limited force to deal with any type of physical disturbance or threat, as opposed to having a bullet that simply says defend oneself. Because if a person puts their hands on you, then that's a physical threat. But to defending yourself could be, I assume he was going to hit me first, so I hit him. I was defending myself. And that, unfortunately, we've had a situation where we had to kind of deal with that. And so that what led us to this position.
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Okay, yes. Now I understand why I had this question here. My question was for Dr. Davis. Is this for any staff member who's trained in CPI that the board will permit the use of reasonable and necessary physical force?
No, ma'am. This is for any. This is part of. This is for any staff, because we may not have had an opportunity to train that staff person before an incident may occur.
All right, Dr. Holmes?
I don't know. I guess as a former teacher, I'm a little on the fence about the one to defend oneself. I see where the argument comes in, but I was in the classroom and I've had students, I don't know, I'm on the fence about that one. I kind of like it back in. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I know what you're saying, but then I see what you're saying about the other bulletin. But I'm really on the fence about, I'm not sure that to defend oneself should be stricken. I'm a little bit on the fence with that.
And I understand, we were as well, and that's why I said we talked about this at length, and we felt that the other bullets allowed you, that they were clear, that the defense to allow to quell a disturbance which threatens physical injury to a person, including those students. So we felt like the person could be the teacher. So if there was a incident that threatened the physical safety and physical injury of a person, which would be the classroom aide, a teacher may be able to intervene. And maybe that classroom aide wasn't in a position to do that. They couldn't defend themselves. The teacher could intervene, or if someone could intervene, or if they were protecting themselves, they could do that.
I think.
But if you had it just as a single bullet that singly stands out as defends oneself, that is very.
I know. I know the nuances of it, but I just want to make sure if we do take that out, that it is understood that teachers do fall under the realm of the other bulletin that you spoke of.
Yes,
if they understand that they fall under that realm, I think I'm fine with taking it out. But I didn't want to take it out if there was not an understanding that includes them within that statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Okay, other questions or comments on item 4.19, JKA, corporal punishment, physical force? All right, item 4.20, policy revision JKD, suspension of students.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Eccles-Johnson.
for clarity, Dr. Davis, on the first page, that second paragraph where it says, according to state law, the board may suspend a student, should we change that to principal or hearing officer or district office, since the board does not suspend students? It says the board may suspend a student from school for commission of any crime. Should we change that to principal or?
I need to take a look at whether or not that's state law.
I see that, but then here, it doesn't say that. It says the board. So it contradicts, yeah. Because the green says the board delegates, but here it says the board may suspend.
All right, so Dr. Eccles-Johnson, did you have a recommendation?
Well, no,
or?
I want Dr. Davis to clarify, because if you look at this policy, in that paragraph, it says that the board may suspend, but if you come down, it says the board delegates the power of suspension. So should we have both there, or why is it necessary to say up here? I know it says because of state law.
So the new stuff in red is the addition. And the old stuff is what's already stated. So the question I have is, I believe that's through state law in statute. And so by removing, but that's why we put in the other part about allowing, designated that to the superintendent.
Okay, but that's why you.
Yes.
Okay, other questions or comments? All right.
The second paragraph, I guess maybe you said the same thing where it says that the board must review a suspension that occurs within the last 10 days. Well, the board doesn't review suspensions. So would that still fall under the second to the last paragraph?
I had that question as well.
I'm sorry, I don't see that.
I don't see it.
Review suspensions will be discretionary. The board must review a suspension.
And then it goes on to have the board must remove a suspension that occurs within the last 10 days of the school year.
So our practice is that you don't suspend a student within the last 10 days to impact their receiving credit. So we would not allow, a student would not be suspended, and we would jeopardize their credit. So you would never, that's why you wouldn't see that. Why that would not come to you. It says if it impacts the students, and I lost my place, in which it makes a student ineligible to receive credit for the school year.
But should we still remove the board and replace that with superintendent or principal?
I mean, you could, yes. Yes.
With the board. Well, we don't do that.
You don't review, yes, that's fine,
The board must review suspensions that occur, and we don't do that.
yes. So that sounds like in the form of a motion to change board to suspension? Board to superintendent, I apologize. Yes, ma'am.
And both.
Okay, so the recommendation's been made, or motion has been made by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is everybody clear on the motion? All right, if you could please restate. So it will say, review a suspension will be discretionary with the superintendent. However, the board must, or the superintendent must review a suspension. So where we say board, we're changing it to superintendent. All right, is everybody clear on that motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Agostini. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
Dr. Elkins Johnson, I'm just trying to get some clarification because at first we're saying it's our statutory duty to suspend students. Then you move down and say we've delegated the power to suspend to the principal, not the superintendent, but the principal and the designee. And then what you're suggesting in this motion is the review of that suspension. We're going to delegate that duty, according to this proposed, to the superintendent. We're giving that more power to the superintendent that apparently this is trying to give to us. I mean, instead of the board reviewing these suspensions like we do with expulsions, if they're appealed.
It doesn't say expulsion.
Right, I'm just saying, right, so we're giving up our board power to review these suspensions within the last 10 days of the school year. We're giving that to the superintendent, as your motion's saying. In other words, well, is that what you're saying? We're giving it to the superintendent instead of us retaining that duty, that review duty.
And Mr. Shad, just as clarify, that is only if that will make the student ineligible for receiving credit.
Yes, which would make a student ineligible to receive credit.
If the suspension causes them to fail. So what we typically do is we wouldn't suspend a student for 10 days, 10 days, and then cause that student and those 10 days will result in the student failing. If the student was removed the last days of school, then we do everything to ensure that student does not fail because they're not at school.
That's a practice.
That is indeed a practice, yes, sir.
But this policy, if this motion carries, this policy is specifically stating that the board is giving, because right now, if it passes without the motion, we retain that right to, that duty to review within the last 10 days if it impacts that child being promoted or not. But if this motion to change this, then we're giving that, we're no longer having that duty and that right. We're giving it to the superintendent to make sure that that happens, even though it's already happening in practice.
Right.
Right, Dr. Elkins Johnson? Okay.
Right. Okay.
Because I wasn't reading it that way, and I was saying Dr. Davis was, but I understand what you're saying, so I'll.
All right. So the motion's been rescinded. Any further question or comment on JKD suspension of students? All right, 4.21, policy JKE, expulsion of students. Item 4.22. Okay, back to item 4.21, JKE, expulsion of students. Dr. Elkins Johnson. They do. They do expel students.
The hearing officer currently does expel students from the district. What you hear are the appeals.
Okay. Policy or item 4.21. Sorry, we just did that one. 4.22, policy JKEE, urine analysis, drug and alcohol testing for certain expelled students. Dr. Uxtall, if you'll turn your mic on.
First paragraph. Okay, it says the district may conduct urinalysis, drug and alcohol testing of students. Do we conduct that? Or do we have a third party that does that?
It would be done, to my knowledge, every drug test that has been administered in conjunction with Richland 2 has been done by a third party.
So should
But
we?
it's done on our behalf, So I think the terminology may is okay. We
Okay.
just would refrain from doing it. We would contract that out.
Okay, I wasn't sure if maybe we did it since it stated here that we may do it. Okay, I'm clear on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, wait, let me make sure. Dr. Johnson, are you finished or?
Or it says in the last paragraph, conducting this test. Yes, I'm finished.
Okay, Mr. Shad.
Just point of clarification, Dr. Davis, it does say in that same section, in terms of conducting urinalysis, drug and alcohol testing of students. Well, the next line, for any drug or alcohol offense. Is this limited to just those who were expelled for consuming, being under the influence, or would this also include those who merely possessed the drugs or the alcohol on campus?
I think it would be any student who probably has been assigned to the LRADAC and received the LRADAC services as a part of whether or not. Who's been assigned to LRADAC and receiving the services that we implement would be subject to being tested. And so that could be for possession, or it could be for use as well.
And my understanding is that folks who go to LRADAC have to go through urinalysis testing anyway. As a condition of remaining in that program. I don't know if we as a district are allowed to see those results while they're going through the program, but I do understand the thought process in making sure that they have continued to demonstrate sobriety. The only concern I do have, Mr. Chair and members of the board, is those who were expelled. We probably did put them in LRADAC. Well, they went through LRADAC as part of it, but they were not necessarily users. And it goes further down in the paragraph that it's to address those who are using. We want them to get off of it, but there may very well be we're pretty sure there's a group of folks who might not have ever used it, but unfortunately they're possessing it, selling it, or what have you. And we've addressed it by expelling them, but I just don't know if we should be testing them when they come back, since they never demonstrated or there was no evidence that they used it at all.
I would say, to my knowledge, Mr. Shad, those students who were expelled, we don't require them to go through the LRADAC services, and so we're not testing. It's usually the ones that we're attempting not to expel, and as part of the condition, we assign them to the LRADAC services as a condition of being continuously enrolled in school.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, item 4.23, revision JL, student welfare safety. Item 4.24, policy JLA, student insurance coverage.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
I think, did I hear Mr. Shad first?
No, actually, that was Mr. Smith.
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. I apologize. So, I told you I haven't eaten any solid food today. It's all starting to merge together.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
this
sir.
is another one that we are asking to pull this time. There's some more work need to be done with this policy.
Okay, all right. JL, student welfare safety, the administration's asking to pull
No,
it.
not the welfare one. The
I'm sorry.
JLA, student insurance coverage.
Okay, I apologize. Wow, all right. 4.24 JLA, student insurance coverage, administration is asking to pull. Item 4.25, policy revision JLCA, physical examinations of students is being rescinded. Item 4.26, policy revision JLCDC, food allergies and special dietary needs.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
Page 2, the bottom, last line, I'd like to make a motion that we remove the word legal for students, healthcare provider, parents/legal guardians, just to be consistent with what we've been writing in our policies.
All right, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Is everybody clear on the motion? Mr. Shad seconds it. Again, I want to make sure everybody's clear on where we're, everybody clear on the motion? All right, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini, seconded by Mr. Shad. If everyone will raise your right hand in support of the motion. Motion passes unanimously. Other comments or questions on policy JLCDC? All right, 4.27, policy JLCE, first aid and emergency care.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
Third paragraph from the bottom, where it states, if the school cannot contact the parent guardian immediately when a very serious accident occurs or when a student becomes alarmingly ill, the school will summon medical service or an ambulance. Do we mean emergency medical services?
Can we scroll up to that on the? Does administration have a comment on that?
It means medical services as needed. It could be, from my understanding, or what I would.
Okay, I see how you're reading it now.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
We're good?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions or comments on 427? 428, JLCEF, concussions in student athletes.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Just a question for clarification. Under teacher notification, the highlighted area, why is it only that the school nurse will receive input from the athletic trainers as needed, will manage non-student athletes according to Return to Learn? Can that also be manage all students? Or why is it just non-student athletes? Okay.
Good evening. According to our Return to Learn procedure, student athletes are managed by the athletic trainers with support from the school nurse. If they're not a student athlete, the school nurse takes the lead in the management with consultation with the athletic trainer for their expertise. The school nurse with input from the athletic trainers. So if the nurse needs input from the trainer for a non-student athlete, they will help us with the concussion management. Is it not in the top part? Student athlete. Well, but you're inserting for a student athlete that it would be either a coach, a trainer, or the athletic director.
Okay.
Will be responsible for
So you'll
notifying
just insert
teachers.
it. Okay. Thank you for that clarity. Okay.
So other questions or comments on?
Mr. Chair, and I think I might just have a question regarding what was just talked about. So what are we going to add for the insert appropriate individual here? Just above that, is that?
It's already in there, that it would be either the coach, the athletic director, athletic trainer.
All right, so then we need to strike the words insert appropriate individual here?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is to,
The coach, athletic trainer, or athletic director.
okay, so we need, the recommendation is to remove the asterisk and the insert appropriate individual here.
No, but it says such as, that's an example, so that's easily.
Yeah, but I think Ms. Agostini's asking for the insert appropriate individual comment.
That's correct. I would like that removed. I don't think that's pertinent too. It should be the coach, athletic trainer, or athletic director will be responsible for notifying teachers of the presence of a concussed athlete in the classroom.
Okay. Well, the motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Is everybody clear on the motion?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is there any discussion? Okay, with no discussion, everyone in favor, raise your right hand. All right, everyone against, raise your right hand. Motion passes, whatever -1 is. Sorry. Yeah. All right, item 4.29, policy revision JLD, school counseling. Item 4.30, policy revision JLDBB, youth suicide prevention. Item 4.31, policy revision JLF, student welfare.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Dr. Davis, for clarity, we started with any principal, assistant principal, school teacher, school attendance, officer, computer technician, nurse, or counselor who has received information. But what about if the TA or the custodian or the cafeteria worker has received it? So is there a way we can say school personnel instead of just listening and stopping right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion has been made.
Those specific people are listed in statutes. That's why it appears that way in the,
Oh,
it's in the statute
It's in the statute that way?
for these specific people.
Yeah.
We can, if there could be a motion to add or any.
how about
Yeah,
all
school
employees?
Or any school personnel?
Do we want to say, or any employee? I mean, I think if we get into volunteers, I think we've had some discussion where that crosses some lines for us in policy.
And I want my volunteer, Mr. Chair, to share the information.
All right. So what?
So I don't know, but I don't know.
Then, Mr. Shea, if somebody can give me a specific recommendation, then whether we want anybody in the whole world or whether we want staff personnel, I need a specific recommendation.
School personnel or school employee. It says of the school.
I'm sorry. So the employees mentioned in the first paragraph are mandated reporters according to statute. In the next paragraph, it addresses other school employees.
In the next paragraph, Mr. Chair, it also
Yes.
says may also report a cause. I concur with Dr. Elkins and say all employees for the first and just delete the list.
Okay.
This is part of the statute.
Then we have to keep that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think what I've heard is there's no recommendation right now. It's covered. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? Item 4.32, policy revision JLIB, student dismissal precautions. And Dr. just make sure you hit your button when you're ready.
Are we on JLIB?
We are.
Can I start? Or ask a
Dr. Elkins, Josh, are you okay if Ms. Agostini goes first? Okay. Ms. Agostini.
just on the release of child to non-custodial parent, in the middle, it says the school will release a student to a non-custodial parent only if there is a permission doing so signed. Do we mean if there is permission doing so signed or a permission slip or form or document? Are we looking for some type of form or document or just permission?
That is with permission from the custodial parent.
Okay, so can we just strike the word "a" if there is permission doing so signed?
Okay, so I have, can we pull it up on the screen and make sure everybody's clear on what we're asking for? Ms. Agostini, if you could just repeat that for me. We're saying, if possible, the school should obtain a signed copy of the parent's custody papers.
Well, yes, either that we need to strike the word "a permission," the word "a" in front of permission, or are they looking for a permission slip, a permission form, a permission document doing so signed? It's just grammatical.
Okay, motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Is everybody clear? If I can get a second. Seconded by Dr. Elkins Johnson.
That's all. Take the A out.
Is there any other discussion?
Doing so signed.
Everyone in favor, raise your right hand. Mr. Shad, your hand's up. Mr. Shad? Yeah. Okay. All right, I think that was unanimous. All right, any other questions or comments?
Yes, I had a question about that and wanted to see if we can insert via telephone. It states that the principal or principal's designee will authorize early or otherwise irregular dismissal only when it's requested in person or in writing by the student's parent or guardian. I know they've been able to do that via telephone, so are we not able to do that any longer, or?
If, and I'll say this with, as politically correct as I can, I think that it's it should not be a practice to use the telephone as dismissal, and to get it in writing or in person, because you don't know if you are indeed talking to the custodial parent.
Right, and I guess I asked that question because especially at the high school level, where, you know, the secretary, someone will call the parent work number, and the parent is given permission for their older sibling to pick them up. So no more telephone?
Usually that is followed with an email.
Okay.
Okay. To give that permission.
Okay.
But it's asked if you would send something to allow the student to be dismissed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Further questions or comments?
I was just going to make a comment to what Dr. Davis said. I'm a professional with that. You have to send in an email in high school along with a follow-up phone call, or they will track you down. So they are very thorough if you're having an early release.
Okay. And last, 4.33, policy revision JQ, student fees, fines, and charges. Questions or comments? Ms. Agostini?
Mr. Chair, I'm confused, and it relates to two of our policies, JQ, the student fees, where it says that the board recognizes it may charge fees to offset the cost of educational materials and supplies. With the policy JFAA, the first policy that we looked at this evening, that says that students may attend public schools without charge. So it's the first paragraph of JQ and JFAA, and if just someone could explain to me the difference of why we can charge fees, but then we're also saying that students can attend without charge.
This is a topic that comes up quite a bit in our district, or has come up quite a bit in our district, about instructional fees and fees that have been shared. I know we have their statute that allows us to charge for fees in our school district for certain materials and for to take courses as well. The initial difference that I can state, as I can see, is that we don't deny you admission to schools if you don't pay the fees. You still have the right to attend school. You still have the right to attend class if you choose not to pay the fees. So JFAA is about admission to school. We don't deny you admission to school.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Well, let me make sure Ms. Agostini's good first, and then
I'm going to say, let Mr. Shad ask his question. I'm still thinking about that.
Ms. Shad.
Nor do you deny, as it says in JQ, any student in education because of their failure to pay these supplementary charges. So you may charge, you may not be able to collect, but there won't be a penalty for not collecting, for not paying the charge in denying a child in our public school an education.
Correct. We would not deny you an opportunity to attend class if you fail to pay your fees.
But, however,
Graduation.
A graduation is not something that's protected by the free and appropriate education.
Exactly.
so you will
You
be
can't lose your right to graduate.
Well, you will have completed all
Right.
the requirements other than paying your way out, so you will not receive that.
You won't participate in the ceremony,
Right.
but you will be a high school graduate.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Agostini, did you want to follow up?
Thank you. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Dr. Constantine, you have a question?
No.
Okay, your mic was on. Sorry. All right. Last item 5.1, adjournment, if I can have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Second? Seconded by Mr. Shad. All in favor? Passes unanimous. Thank you very much.